Hey guys, what's going on? Sean here with Westcott Designs, and today I'm going to be showing you how to do the assembly and install of the 2024 Toyota Land Cruiser roof rack. Let's get started. All right, now before we get started, I do want to mention that this roof rack works for the LC250 as well as the Lexus GX 550. First step we're going to want to start with is on the very front. You're going to be putting 2 bolts in, and this will kind of hold up the side rails and keep them vertical for you, so the assembly process is a lot easier. All right, as you can see here, there's a little slot right here that the 2 bolts are going to go through, and back here you have your 2 holes that'll screw in. That way you can kind of adjust and move things around and line everything up. All right, so the next step's gonna be putting the crossbars in. I always start from the front and work my way down. As you're doing this, you're gonna wanna go side to side to make sure that that bar is not putting pressure on any of the side mounts. Now, when you're doing this, the 3rd and the 7th crossbar, you're gonna wanna leave out for the installation process. If you look over here, all the cross members go in the smaller slots. And on the 3rd and the 7th one, that crossbar is gonna end up sitting over the main bolt for the bracket that goes into the roof of the vehicle. So you're not gonna be able to access that with that crossbar in. So that crossbar, the 3rd and the 7th, will go in at a later time after the roof rack's already installed on the vehicle. Okay, so for the last crossbar, this one's gonna be vertical, and we're gonna be putting our Westcott Designs bottle opener on it as well. You're gonna take the bolt, and this small section up in here, it's 1 bolt. And the secondary one is going to go right in this hole down here. All right, so the next step after you have all these done by hand, I like to go through and just kind of snug everything up and get it tight so nothing's shifting as we move on to our next step. These guys don't take a lot because it is going into aluminum, so you don't want to over tighten them. And for this guy, for all these bolts, we're gonna be using a 5/32 Allen key for these. All right, now for our Westcott Designs bottle opener, you just wanna make sure everything's nice and even all the way across and it's lined up nicely. All right, so the next step after you got everything tightened up, we're gonna be installing our brackets to mount to the roof. You're gonna have 3 brackets per side. They're gonna be different sizes. From front of the vehicle to back, it goes from smallest to largest, and we have it packaged that way as well, where the small ones start off and just go back. And these guys are gonna require a nylock nut and 2 bolts per side. Now, if you look at these brackets, you'll notice that it's got smaller and larger holes. The smaller holes with the little cutout, that's gonna be up against the side rails, and the larger holes are gonna be what the main bolt goes through to mount to the cab. All right, now on the middle and the rear brackets, you can get these bolts a little bit more snug. So all you're gonna want is just a little side-to-side play, but there's enough space because as you go back, the brackets kind of kick outwards, so you're able to get the main bolts through. so the next step before we put the roof rack on, you're gonna wanna get a plastic trim removal tool. And there's 3 of these plastic cover pieces along the top rail here. Just get the trim removal tool. These guys just pop right off. And there's 2 bolts under each one that you're gonna be using a 10mm socket for. And when we remove these guys, there's a little bit of a process because of the bracket that's underneath it. You can't just take one completely out, then the other. You gotta kind of work them out evenly side by side as you're coming up. All right, so when removing these, like I said, you're gonna wanna make sure that you're pulling them out evenly. These guys are pretty tight in there. So just do a couple turns on the first one. Eventually they'll get pretty loose and easy to remove. Once they hit that point, you can just take them out completely. Once you have those removed, a little bracket piece, just pop it out. All right, so after you have all 6 of those completely removed, next step what you're gonna wanna do is prep the surface for the RTV that we're gonna be putting down to seal everything up. What I like to do is use a clean microfiber and just some glass cleaner. All right, so once you have the surface clean, next step you're gonna wanna take some RTV silicone and you're gonna be filling around where your rack spacers are gonna be sitting. So you're gonna wanna put a decent amount in there. You just go around the hole where the bolt's gonna go through. Then you just take your spacer and stick it directly over. And you're gonna wanna do that on all 3 sections on each side. All right, so once you have those set in place, those spacers, what you're gonna wanna do is grab a buddy and get help lifting the roof rack up on top. Ready? It's easiest to go from the rear of the vehicle up and over. You just want to make sure that your brackets are lined up with where your spacers were. All right, once you have the roof rack set in place and all the bolts lined up, what you're going to want to do is take a little bit of that RTV and we're going to place it. You can either place it directly on the bolt or you can go and you can just squeeze some inside each of the spacers here. What that will do is help maintain a complete waterproof seal. Drop your main bolts in. Get them started by hand. All right, and as I mentioned on the assembly of the rack, that rear bar is going to be vertical, and the only reason we do that is to be able to clear the antenna. All right, now as I had mentioned before, when taking the bolts out, you kind of want to go back and forth with them and remove them as evenly as possible. Putting them back in, you're going to want to do the same thing. There is a bracket that's located underneath in between the roof and the headliner that could potentially snap, which then you have to drop the headliner and try to fish those parts out. So the next step, once you've gotten your rack adjusted properly and even on both sides, you can go ahead and go through and tighten up your main bolts. And the next step is going to be tightening the side bracket bolts. All right, now so on the 3rd and 7th bar, you're gonna wanna make sure on one side you leave some of the hardware loose on the side mounting plate. That way you can kind of open this guy up and get the bar to drop in. So what'll happen when you tighten those bolts, it kind of sucks everything together, which will make it difficult to get these bars back in place. All right, everybody, that wraps up our assembly and install of the 2024 Toyota Land Cruiser roof rack. If you guys learned anything or enjoyed the video, feel free to drop us a like and subscribe to our channel.